6 Americans could have been captured or even killed if it wasn't for one man. In November 1979, the streets of Tehran erupted in chaos during the Iranian Revolution. Angry crowds filled the city, revolutionary guards patrolled the streets, and militants were hunting for Americans. When protesters stormed the US Embassy in Tehran, they captured 52 American diplomats, triggering one of the most dramatic crises of the Cold War. But in the chaos, 6 diplomats slipped away before the embassy was completely surrounded. For hours, they wandered through Tehran, hiding in plain sight. If they were discovered, they would almost certainly become new hostages, or worse. Their survival depended on a daring decision made by Canada's ambassador to Iran, Ken Taylor. And soon, the CIA would launch one of the most creative espionage missions in history, a mission so unusual. It involved Hollywood, fake movie scripts, and a fictional film called Argo. What followed became known as the Canadian Caper, one of the boldest intelligence operations ever attempted. For several terrifying days, the 6 Americans moved from place to place across Tehran, hiding in apartments and constantly changing locations to avoid detection. The Iranian revolutionaries were searching everywhere for Americans. Posters appeared across the city. Roadblocks were set up. If the 6 diplomats were discovered, they would likely become new hostages in a crisis already gripping the world. Their situation was desperate. Then, help arrived from an unexpected ally. Canada's ambassador to Iran, Ken Taylor, made a courageous decision. Despite the enormous risk, he secretly allowed the 6 Americans to hide inside the Canadian ambassador's residence in Tehran. For weeks, the diplomats remained hidden inside the Canadian compound, living quietly and avoiding windows while the revolution raged outside. But there was one major problem. Iranian authorities were becoming suspicious. Sooner or later, the diplomats would need to leave Iran entirely, and that was where the CIA stepped in. At CIA headquarters in Washington, an intelligence officer named Tony Mendez began developing a plan so unusual that many initially thought it sounded absurd. What if the Americans could pretend to be a Hollywood film crew? Hollywood producers often traveled around the world scouting locations for science fiction films. Iran's dramatic landscapes would be a believable place for such a crew. So the CIA created an elaborate cover story. They invented a fake movie called Argo. Posters were printed. Scripts were written. A production company was even created in Los Angeles to make the operation look real. The 6 diplomats would become a Canadian film crew scouting locations in Iran. It was a plan so bold that it might actually work. To make the operation convincing, the CIA went to extraordinary lengths. They held real press events in Hollywood announcing the fictional science fiction film. Concept art was created. Film advertisements appeared in industry magazines. The illusion was complete. When Tony Mendez arrived in Tehran, he carried with him Canadian passports, fake identities, and movie scripts. The 6 diplomats practiced their roles carefully. They memorized their fake biographies. They learned to talk like film professionals. If they made even one mistake at the airport, the entire operation could collapse. On January 27, 1980, the group quietly drove to Tehran's Mehrabad airport. The atmosphere was tense. Armed guards checked passports and questioned travelers carefully. The 6 Americans handed over their new Canadian passports, presenting themselves as filmmakers scouting locations for the movie Argo. For a few nerve-wracking moments, Iranian officials examined the documents. If the deception failed, they would be arrested immediately. Then, suddenly, the passports were stamped. The group walked through security. Hours later, their plane lifted off from Tehran. The 6 Americans had escaped. The mission was a success. For many years, the operation remained secret. Canada publicly received credit for protecting the diplomats, while the CIA's involvement stayed hidden. Only in 1997 did the full story finally emerge. The daring operation became known as the Canadian Caper. Decades later, the incredible escape inspired the award-winning film Argo, bringing the story to a global audience. But the real events were even more remarkable than Hollywood's version. The Canadian Caper remains one of the most extraordinary intelligence missions of the Cold War. It demonstrated the power of international cooperation between Canada and the United States, During one of the most dangerous political crises of the 20th century, 6 lives were saved, a revolution was outsmarted, and a fictional Hollywood movie helped pull off one of the greatest intelligence escapes in history. History is filled with stories of espionage and daring escapes, but few are as unusual or as brilliant as the Canadian caper. In the middle of a revolution, when tensions between nations were at their highest, a small group of diplomats survived thanks to courage, trust, and one incredibly creative plan. Sometimes the greatest spy missions don't involve guns or explosions. Sometimes, all it takes is a fake movie script. The Canadian caper shows how intelligence, courage, and creativity can change the course of history, but many incredible Cold War stories remain hidden in the shadows. What do you think about this daring CIA plan? Was it the most creative escape in intelligence history? Let us know your thoughts in the comments and join the Time Navigator as we uncover more forgotten stories from the past.